I want to take a look at another clip from the TV show. This is Marshall McLuhan.
Global village is not created by the motor car or even by the airplane. It's created by instant electronic information movement. The global village is at once as wide as the planet and as small as a little town where everybody is maliciously engaged, poking his nose at everybody else's business. The global village is a world in which you don't necessarily have harmony. You have extreme concern with everybody else's business and much involvement in everybody else's life. It's a sort of Ann Landers column writ large. And it doesn't necessarily mean harmony and peace and quiet, but it does mean huge involvement in everybody else's affairs. And so the global village is as big as the planet and as small as the village post office.
We now share too much about each other to be strangers to each other.
Another remarkable clip. If again, I'll stop saying it. This is the last week, but McLuhan would have been vindicated, I think, by the internet, especially by social media. There were definitely things that Marshall McLuhan got wrong, as we've seen. There's no question about it. How could he not have gotten some things wrong? But he said some things of enduring value that seem to help us to perhaps understand what's happening to us now. But this idea of the global village, very famous idea, really transcends McLuhan's work. Now people have used that expression without knowing that it came from McLuhan, and that's a really true sign of success for a philosophical idea, or any idea. This idea of the whole world has been brought together, not by international travel or things like that, but really by communication technology, especially television. This is the age of television, 1967, the golden age of television, in the sense not that it was the best television, but that it was the time when its effects were being felt most strongly. And McLuhan thought that what its main effect was to bring people together, to create one world for them, something which is quite new. And you can hear in the way that he describes it, his own ambivalence. The way he described it, he says that the whole world is now like a little village in which everyone's maliciously concerned with everyone else's business. I mean, that is a typical characterization of small town life, the dark side of small town life. The way that if you grew up in such a place, you have a certain knowledge of that. That growing up in a small place, the good thing is that everyone knows each other, and the bad thing is that everyone knows each other. Right? And McLuhan certainly sees this global village, this sort of everybody sort of knowing what everyone else is doing, so to speak, literally impossible. But, can be is perhaps got a real dark side. I mean, we move away from such places, many of us, to big cities just because we want to get away from that. We want to be anonymous. We want to be free. We don't want other people always knowing about us and where we came from, our families, so to speak. So there's an ambivalence there, but also we have to recognize, the huge power of modern communications technology, again, especially television, to create what he calls involvement, and this involvement can take on different forms. Right, you can be involved in the trivialities that people normally trivialities. There's nothing wrong with trivialities, but the mundane things that people post in social media. But there's other involvement can get much more intense, right? And certainly one of the things that McLuhan had in the back of his mind, maybe not even in the back of his mind, was something like the civil rights movement of the 1960s and the Vietnam War. Both of those things. If you're thinking about the world, especially about the American world in the 1960s, you're thinking about those things, those two great movements and events that really defined the times. This is another one of sort of joking around here. This is the images Grant Wood's. I hope it's Grant Wood. I think it's Grant Wood. Grant Wood, the painter, American Gothic, one of the most famous paintings in American history, no doubt about it. But one that's often taken to characterize a certain closed-minded American attitude. This couple. These are the people who, deny Darwin and think that their own brand of Christianity is the only brand of Christianity that's viable. And I don't know if that's what Grant Wood meant by it, but certainly it's been taken that way. And one of the things that McLuhan is pointing out is that this guy's world, here he is again, that this guy's world is coming to an end in the sense that this guy can no longer live within his bubble, that electric media have brought people closer, and so that they can no longer so easily ignore each other. The others, the shock of recognition in an electric information environment. Minority groups can no longer be contained, ignored. Too many people know too much about each other. Our new environment compels commitment and participation. We have become irrevocably involved with and responsible for each other. I think that the civil rights movement and Vietnam are the two most prominent examples of the way that electric media were forcing people to acknowledge things that before they frankly weren't forced to acknowledge. White people, most of them could safely ignore black people in America for a very long time. And then all of a sudden you have in your television, you have these images of people being brutalized in the American South. People having water hoses turned on them, people being clubbed, children being brutalized by the police. And after that, can you still pretend that there's nothing wrong with your country? Certainly not. The war in Vietnam, which is a really tragic war, and the first television war, as they say, has been remarked many times. You have this carnage happening to the American army and committed by the American army, and the images are being right there in your television as they happen. Basically, the day's news, the day's carnage from Vietnam. Vietnam became something that could not be ignored, and one of the reasons it couldn't be ignored is it was right there in your living room, creating this, obliterating the distances, the distances, geographical distances in terms of experience. All of a sudden, white people had some notion of what black people were contending with in America. I mean, of course, some knew, but this created a whole new consciousness. So this sense of involvement, that this guy, this figure, he now is involved with things that before were not confronting him in that way. I might have read about him in the newspaper, might have read a book about things, but there's a certain immediacy in the television image that creates this closer. I mean, things are closer now. So again, McLuhan's very cagey in terms of politics, I think. I mean, there are clearly things that he says in that TV show where he comes out and says that he's interested in things that irritate him or annoy him. He's kind of a traditional college professor. He's a professor of English literature, and he sees his world changing. And generally speaking, he's welcoming it. He's saying it's inevitable, but it's clearly there are things about it, this new world, that disturb him, and this darker side is really what we'll be looking at, I think, for the rest of the course. So a more critical view.